Hello and welcome to this new episode of Waking Earth, where we will be discussing DNA and frequency accretion. But before I begin, I'd like to explain something interesting that's just happened that cannot be explained away by any traditional means. I was at the park yesterday with my children and my daughter was amazed at all the yellow dandelions. And I told her there's another type of flower called a buttercup, and when we were young we used to pick them and put them under our chin, and our chin would turn yellow. So we were looking around for some buttercups, but we couldn't find any. And that was that. And when I got home, I turned on Facebook and started scrolling through my feed, and around 3 posts in, this meme popped up. I was absolutely amazed when I saw this, as it was exactly what I'd just been talking about, and I've never seen this before in my entire life. These type of events happen so often that I know deep down within myself that I have actually manifested this to appear in my hologram. Some people who are skeptical may explain it away as either a coincidence or maybe your phone is listening to you or something like that, which I've no doubt is happening. However, this meme is not an advert for any product, and was simply a meme that was posted by one of my friends. And to make this even more crazy, a little bit later on, it was only about 5 or 10 minutes later on, I played, it was actually a SecureTeam video, and there was a lady who was filming a UFO, and she actually mentioned the town of Buttercup. So check this out.
Oh, is it? Hang on. What is it? UFO sighting. Of course, this is Nevada because Area 51's nearby, but a couple 100 miles away. So this obviously makes sense. Anyway, there's a UFO. Goodbye.
Well, even if my phone was somehow listening to me, there's no way that the whole AI infrastructure can present something like this to you in reality, as these are real world events supposedly, and the only explanation I have is that I've manifested these 2 events to appear in my hologram. I've put the link to the SecureTeam video down in the description, and please check out this channel as they have some really good videos. Now, once these types of events have happened so many times, you will eventually reach the conclusion that you are actually manifesting these things to occur. Now, the question that will really bake your noodle is, if I hadn't talked about buttercups in the park, then would this mean that this video with the woman filming the UFO would have actually existed? Would this have existed in my reality? Have I actually created this entire event to occur? Once you start contemplating things like this, it does really boggle the mind as to how powerful our manifestation abilities actually are. I've come to the conclusion that we're not living in a singular reality, but rather we are all points of consciousness having a shared experience in the now moment. So if you manifest something to appear in your hologram, that thing can appear as though it was created by someone else, with threads running backwards through time. So if I was to take the effort to, say, track down this lady that filmed the UFO and speak to her about this video, it's likely she filmed it at some point in the past, meaning before I was talking about buttercups in the park. So if I truly have manifested this to appear, then how can my thoughts in any moment travel backwards through time and cause something to be created at a previous moment in time? I've had this type of experience happen to me enough times to reach the conclusion that time is not linear as mainstream science suggests, but rather all that exists is happening in the now moment, and our perception of the past and the future are simply creations of ourselves and simply filters for how we perceive the now moment. We can manifest things to appear in our hologram that seemingly have been created by other people, again with threads running backwards through time, as though that thing has always existed independently from ourselves. And the creation we have manifested becomes its own living, breathing thing in our personal space-time hologram. Now, another question that springs to mind is, if someone who had never met me, say someone who lives in Australia, views this same video, would they see the same woman mentioning the word buttercup? Or, in their reality, would this video be different? Because I've had this experience, then anyone who I speak to about it, or anyone who views my video, this video about this, will automatically, what I call, become quantum locked into this particular version of reality where this exists. Meaning, because I've created something to exist in this world, does it only exist for others once I have interacted with another person, whose reality then becomes a consensus reality to include this manifestation? All very interesting questions, and it could explain the whole phenomenon of the Mandela effect, where different groups of people have different memories of the same event. And it is only through the advent of the internet where these different groups of people who have lived in slightly different versions of reality have come together and realized the differences. Okay, so now we'll move on to today's topic, which is entitled DNA and frequency accretion. Okay, so contemporary science says that DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and there's a little text blurb there from the Merriam-Webster dictionary that you can read. It just tells you what it says that DNA actually is, but we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, contemporary science says we have 3 strands of DNA, and the rest is actually simply labelled junk DNA. This junk DNA is not junk at all. In fact, they are strands 4 to 12 as part of a larger 12-strand DNA template. There are beings incarnated on this planet known as indigos who actually have more than 12 strands of DNA in their template, but for the majority of people on the planet, the 12-strand template is the norm. The DNA template is a morphinogenic field scalar wave template with each strand corresponding to one of the 12-dimensional levels of the 15-dimensional time matrix structure which we exist within. In simple terms, when each strand is activated, it begins running the frequencies of that dimensional level within your template, and therefore allows you to perceive those frequency bands of consciousness and the reality fields associated with that strand. Because we only have 3 strands activated, we only perceive dimensions 1 to 3 of the 15-dimensional time matrix. If we wanted to perceive dimension 4, which is commonly referred to as the astral plane, then we would need to have DNA strand 4 activated, and so on. This diagram is composed of information taken from a body of work called the Freedom Teachings, and shows a visual representation of how the DNA strand template would look. However, this is simply a conceptualization and not designed to show the actual geometrical arrangements. The Freedom Teachings is an incredibly detailed body of work covering creation mechanics and techniques for spiritual development. And these teachings have since transitioned into the Tan-Tri-Ahura teachings, which are available from arrayus.com, link in the description. And you will also find a link there for a fantastic book called Voyagers 2, which includes much more detailed information about the 12-strand DNA template. So you can check this out if you would like to learn more. A 15-dimensional time matrix has 12 manifest dimensional bands, each separated into groups of 3. The first 3 dimensions, which is 1 to 3, is the reality most of us walk around in. We have our D3 mental body perceiving D2, dimension 2, as our physical reality, and D1 as our atomic matter base. These 3 dimensions make up what is known as our current manifest perception and existence. Each strand corresponds to each of the 12 manifest chakras within our multidimensional anatomy. Each of the groupings of 3-dimensional levels is classed as a density level. So we exist in density 1, which is dimensions 1 to 3, which is up here. Density 2 would be dimensions 4 to 6, which is here. Density 3 would be dimensions 7 to 9, here. And density 4 would be dimensions 10 to 12, which is up here. Each of the 4 density levels has something called a Hoover body, which is not shown on this diagram, but it's basically a level of your multidimensional anatomy that allows you to interact with that density level of the manifest 15-dimensional time matrix. As described in my previous video, we have 4 density shields that correspond to each of the 4 density levels. As we can see in this diagram, density 1 is DNA strands 1 to 3, which contains the telluric density 1 shield and the Nada-Hoover body incarnate identity. Density 2 is strands 4 to 6, which includes the Doradic density 2 shield and the Alpha-Hoover body soul identity. At this level you would have something called a halophase 6th dimensional Merkaba, which is part of the structure that you would have if you had these strands activated. You'd exist, or you'd be aware of density 2 as well as density 1, and you would have this 6th dimensional Merkaba and the Hoover body associated with it, which is the Nada-Hoover body. No, it isn't. It's the Doradic density 2 shield and the Alpha-Hoover body. Yeah, okay. Density 3 is DNA strands 7 to 9, which includes the Choric shield and the Betcha-Hoover body. At this level you would have a quadra-phase 9th dimensional Merkaba. And density 4, which is strands 10 to 12, includes the Maharic density 4 shield and the Mahara-Hoover body. At this level you would have a Mahunta phase 12th dimensional Merkaba. So depending on which DNA strands you have activated will determine your perceptual range and experiential freedom whilst existing in manifest form. There is much more complexity to this structure, which you can read about in the book Voyagers 2. Again, the link for that is in the description. However, I will be covering much more simpler concepts here to describe how we activate our higher strands and begin raising our consciousness to perceive higher dimensional levels of consciousness in our perceptual experience. In very simple terms, each DNA strand has 12 substrands, meaning the entire 12-strand template contains 144 substrands. As we walk and breathe through our life, we accrete frequencies into our DNA, thus building each substrand at a time. Once a particular substrand has accreted all of its frequencies, it plugs into the next substrand up and so on, and then they build. When one whole DNA strand has completely filled up all of its 12 substrands, that DNA strand will plug into the next DNA strand up and the process continues. What is supposed to happen is once we've accreted all the 3 DNA strands in density 1, we are supposed to undergo a process of consciousness expansion into density 2, which is the combined dimensions 4, 5 and 6. These density expansions are supposed to occur in 8-year cycles, meaning the first expansion into density 2 occurs at the end of age 8, so you would be age 9. The expansion into density 3 is supposed to occur at the end of age 16, which is age 17. The expansion into density 4 is supposed to occur at the end of age 24, which is age 25. And after you've accreted all the frequencies of density 4, you would reach the age of 33, at which point you are supposed to be a fully embodied 12-strand avatar consciousness identity. However, due to a number of quite unfortunate metatronic distortions in our larger local light body structure, which is the structure of creation we exist within, strand 3 is unable to plug into strand 4, meaning our perceptual reality is locked within density 1. Which is dimensions 1 to 3. This is the reason why our science says we only have 3 strands of DNA, because literally that is all that's activated. There are actually missing subfrequency bands in the D3 level of our DNA template, which actually means that our current D3 mental body level of consciousness is only experienced as the lower part of D3. The higher part of D3, beyond these missing subfrequency bands, is not available to our waking consciousness, which is why part of our consciousness appears to be unavailable for access, which most people would know this as being the unconscious mind. Our unconscious mind is actually the higher portion of D3, and you may actually find that if you could place your conscious awareness in the higher part of D3, you may find the link there to your higher strands of perceptual awareness, meaning if you had access to your unconscious mind, you may also have access to higher multiple dimensional levels and density levels above where you are right now. So your unconscious mind is therefore your link to your higher selves stations of identity awareness, which of course is dependent on if those strands are activated or not. Once we've filled in all of the DNA strands and sub-DNA strands up to where the missing sub-frequency bands are located in D3, the personal 12-strand DNA template is unable to integrate any more frequencies. So what happens then is frequencies will continue to bombard the DNA template, which causes aging and deterioration of the body in a process called molecular compaction, which ultimately ends in death. Growing old and dying is not a natural process, and originally we simply expanded our DNA template to the age of 33, where we became a fully embodied 12-strand avatar identity. Then we had the option of ascending into a higher time cycle. Okay, now I've explained the very basics of our 12-strand DNA template. There is a very important piece of information to be aware of. This diagram represents the DNA template structure that exists in what is called external creation. However, due to extreme metatronic distortions and damage to our local light body structure of our 15-dimensional time matrix, a process called failsafe has triggered within the body of God source consciousness field, which is an autoimmune response process designed to prevent damage moving beyond a certain point in order to protect the integrity of something called the CRYST code, which is KRYST. Which is the very foundational eternal life mathematical and geometrical seed code template on which the original eternal life manifest reality is built. In simple terms, failsafe is opening up a deeper template that exists behind external creation, which is referred to as internal creation. Once internal creation is opened up into external creation, this begins a process of cycling very powerful frequencies known as plasma frequencies from internal creation into external creation. These plasma frequencies are designed to act as both an anchor to prevent further damage and as a mechanism to begin repairing the damage that has already been done. The interplanial physics involved in this process are truly mind-boggling and way beyond the scope of this video. However, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because it affects the very structure of our DNA template and how it functions from what is explained in this diagram, in this information. What is now actually happening is that density 1 only, which is up here, which is strands 1 to 3, is being blended with the corresponding density 1 in internal creation. This is being done by giving us a hosted internal creation DNA template, which is known as the K+8 plasma template. And you can read about this in if you click on the link in the description for Arrayus.com. There's a series of courses there called the KDDL courses, and it explains all about failsafe and actually what is happening. So you can check that out if you'd like to learn more about that. Once the blending of our external density 1 has shifted over into internal density 1, and this process will take about 900 years, we can then continue with our conscious evolution, only now the higher density levels we will be expanding into will now be internal creation density levels, as opposed to the traditional external creation. So density 1 here will now become internal creation density 1, and these density levels here, and basically all this information here and here and here refers to external creation mechanics. So all of this information is going to be different. We're not expanding into these levels anymore. We're expanding into the internal creation density levels, which is all different information. Essentially, because of the enormous damage to our external creation light body structure, we are being redirected to an internal creation evolutionary path. This means that, yes, all this information is going to be different. However, the basic concept of how DNA strands accrete frequency, build and plug into each other is essentially the same. Okay, so now we've got some of this complicated information out of the way, we can concentrate on some more easier concepts about how we actually speed up this process of DNA activation. So in the next video we will be covering some very interesting information about what sets different people apart in terms of whether they would be classed as awakened or unawakened, and that's a subjective term basically, depending on where you are. So I hope you enjoyed this quick introduction to DNA templates, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to give this video a like if you enjoyed this kind of information, and click the notification bell icon if you would like to be notified by YouTube when the next video is available. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.